Imagine every object you carry must earn its weight. A stone can cut, a bone can dig, wood can feed a fire, but this crystal does nothing. It cannot hunt, it cannot protect you, it cannot even become a useful tool, and yet someone carried it home. That decision sounds small. It may be one of the strangest decisions in human history, because this did not happen once. Across different continents, in different climates, and across hundreds of thousands of years, early humans repeatedly collected crystals that appear to have had no practical purpose. Some were carried into caves, some were gathered from different locations, and some were placed together in what looks like a small collection. No cutting edge, no hole for a necklace, no obvious signs that they were hammered, sharpened, burned, or turned into anything else. They were simply found, moved, and kept. The oldest examples may reach back roughly 780,000 years. That is long before farming, long before cities, long before written language, and possibly long before our own species was the only kind of human walking the earth. So why would a creature living under constant pressure from hunger, predators, injury, and weather spend energy carrying home a beautiful but apparently useless stone? Was it simple curiosity? Was it the beginning of collecting? Was it something social? Something symbolic? Or did crystals trigger a reaction in the human mind that began before modern humans even existed? To understand why this matters, first remove almost everything that makes carrying an object easy today. No car, no backpack with padded straps, no shelf waiting at home, no spare room filled with things you might use later. An early human group had to move food, water, tools, hides, children, and sometimes a living ember. Whatever containers they possessed, space and strength were limited. Every extra object required effort, and effort required calories. That crystal might weigh only a few ounces, but carrying it still meant using a hand, placing it inside a hide or fiber container, protecting it from being lost, and moving it across uneven ground. The object had to remain important long after the surprise of finding it had passed. Think about the difference. Picking up something unusual takes a second. Carrying it away requires a decision. Keeping it requires another. And gathering several of the same kind may require returning to that decision again and again. This is why archaeologists pay attention to objects called manuports. A manuport is not necessarily something a human made. It is a natural object that appears to have been deliberately transported from one place to another. The object may be completely unchanged. The important evidence is not what someone did to it. The important evidence is that someone chose it. One of the most famous crystal finds comes from Zhoukoudian, a vast cave system southwest of modern Beijing. The site is best known for remains of Homo erectus, often called Peking man, along with large numbers of stone tools and animal bones. But among all those obviously useful things, excavators also reported 20 quartz crystals. 20. Not rough chunks selected to make blades. Not broken pieces left behind after tool production. Small, naturally formed crystals that had been brought into a place occupied by ancient humans. The deposits at Zhoukoudian cover an enormous span of time. And assigning one exact age to every behavior there is difficult. But current research places the ancient human fascination with crystals as far back as roughly 780,000 years. The people associated with these early finds were not modern collectors. They had no glass cabinets, no written names for minerals, and no scientific explanation for why a transparent stone grew with flat faces and sharp angles. But they could see that it was different. Quartz can be useful. It can sometimes be broken to produce sharp edges. But these crystals were not treated like ordinary raw material. If the goal had been to make a cutting tool, breaking the crystal would have been the useful part. Instead, its natural form survived. That is the first clue. The feature that prevented it from being useful as a finished tool may have been the feature that made it valuable, its shape. But one cave can always mislead us. Objects can move through soil. Animals can carry things. Water can deposit minerals where humans later happen to live. So the mystery becomes much stronger when the same behavior appears somewhere else. Thousands of miles away, at Singi Talav, in Rajasthan, India, archaeologists uncovered 6 small quartz crystals in an Acheulean layer now dated to around 177,000 years ago. Some were tiny, only a few millimeters long, far too small to provide much usable stone. Yet they were complete enough for their natural crystal form to remain recognizable. The crystals also differed from one another in ways suggesting they may have come from separate crystal clusters, possibly gathered from more than one location. That changes the picture. This may not have been one person noticing one strange rock on one unusual afternoon. It may have been a repeated habit. Find one, recognize it, keep it, then recognize another. At Singi Talav, these crystals existed beside a technology built around usefulness. Acheulean toolmakers knew stone extremely well. They understood which materials fractured cleanly. They could remove flakes in a controlled sequence. They could shape large cutting tools with edges that remained effective in the hand. These were not people who could not tell the difference between useful stone and useless stone. They may have understood that difference better than almost anyone alive today. And they still carried the crystals. But the clearest example may come from Ga-Mohana Hill North Rockshelter in South Africa. Today the area lies near the edge of the Kalahari Desert. 105,000 years ago, however, the environment was wetter and greener. Modern humans used the shelter while moving through that landscape. They left stone tools. They left pieces of ostrich eggshell, material that may have been used for carrying water. And within a small area of the deposit, archaeologists found 22 white calcite crystals. 22 crystals concentrated within roughly half a square meter. They were not part of the shelter wall. Their likely geological source was about 2.5 kilometers away. Someone had brought them there. Calcite was also a poor choice for making the kinds of tools found at the site. It is relatively soft. It splits along predictable flat planes instead of producing the strong, sharp fracture needed for an effective stone blade. The crystals showed no evidence of being deliberately reshaped, no perforations, no clear wear from being suspended as jewelry, and no obvious mechanical task that required 22 of them to be gathered in one place. They seem to have been valuable in their natural form. This is where the mystery stops being a single archaeological curiosity. In China, ancient humans collected quartz. In India, they transported tiny crystal prisms. In southern Africa, Homo sapiens gathered calcite crystals into a concentrated group. Other possible examples have been reported across Africa and Eurasia. Different humans, different minerals, different landscapes, the same basic decision. Keep the strange stone. So what were the crystals for? The most honest answer is that we do not know, but we can test the obvious possibilities. Could they have been tools? Some crystalline minerals can be useful, but these particular objects show no clear evidence of being worked into tools. Several were too small, too soft, or mechanically unsuitable for the cutting jobs performed at their sites. Could they have helped make fire? Certain stones can produce sparks when struck against the right material, but the archaeological crystals do not preserve clear evidence that this was their role. And a concentrated cache of soft calcite would be especially difficult to explain that way. Could they have been jewelry? Possibly in a loose sense. Someone could have displayed or handled a crystal without drilling it, but the crystals were not pierced, mounted, or visibly altered like later ornaments. Could they have been traded? Perhaps. Humans exchange objects for social reasons as well as practical ones, but calling something trade does not solve the mystery. It simply moves the question. Why would another person want it? Could the crystals have been used in ritual? That is possible too. Crystals eventually became important in the beliefs and ceremonies of many cultures. But projecting those later beliefs hundreds of thousands of years into the past would be a mistake. There is no label beside the crystals explaining what they meant. No written prayer, no surviving story. Archaeology can show that an object moved. It can sometimes show how it was used, but it cannot excavate a private thought. And that leaves us with a possibility so ordinary that it is easy to underestimate. Maybe early humans collected crystals because crystals were fascinating. In 2026, researchers tried to test that idea in an unusual way. They could not ask Homo erectus why a crystal deserved attention, so they studied one of our closest living relatives, chimpanzees. The experiment involved 9 adult chimpanzees living in 2 social groups. These were enculturated chimpanzees, meaning they had experience with humans and with objects that would not normally appear in a wild forest. That limitation matters. But it also allowed the researchers to safely present unfamiliar materials and observe what the chimpanzees chose to do. In the first experiment, the researchers placed a large transparent quartz crystal near an ordinary rock of similar size. At first, both objects attracted attention. That is normal. Anything new can be interesting for a moment. But the attention did not remain equal. The chimpanzees increasingly preferred the crystal. They picked it up. They rotated it. They tilted it toward the light. They examined it from different angles, and one carried it away into the sleeping area. When caretakers wanted the crystal back, they had to exchange favored foods, including bananas and yogurt, to recover it. The crystal had acquired value without being food, and without functioning as a tool. Then the researchers made the test more difficult. They mixed small quartz crystals with a group of ordinary rounded pebbles. The crystals were similar in size to examples ancient humans had collected. The chimpanzees could identify and select them within seconds. When quartz, calcite, and pyrite crystals were placed among the pebbles, the chimpanzees still separated the crystal-like forms from the ordinary stones. One chimpanzee repeatedly held a crystal close to his eye and studied its transparency for more than 15 minutes. Another carried several objects to a platform and separated the crystals from the pebbles. No one taught them mineralogy. No one explained that crystals were rare. The objects themselves held their attention. The researchers identified 2 features that seemed especially important: transparency and geometric shape. Think about the environment in which primate vision evolved. Trees branch, clouds spread, rivers curve, animal bodies are rounded. Most ordinary stones are irregular, broken, or smoothed by water. The natural world contains patterns, but perfect-looking straight edges and flat intersecting surfaces are unusual. A well-formed crystal is different. It can look manufactured even though no creature made it. Its faces repeat, its angles remain consistent. Light enters it, bends, and returns in unexpected ways. Turn it slightly, and the object changes. Hold it against the sky, and something solid appears almost invisible. To a mind designed to notice patterns and investigate exceptions, a crystal is almost impossible to ignore. The chimpanzee experiment does not prove that ancient humans collected crystals for the same reason. 9 chimpanzees in human-influenced surroundings cannot speak for every ape, much less for people who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. The researchers themselves argue that future studies should include less enculturated apes and, ideally, observations involving other great ape species. But the experiment does demonstrate something important. An attraction to crystals does not require a jewelry shop. It does not require a religious story. And it does not require someone else to explain that the object is special. The combination of shape, transparency, and novelty may be enough to pull attention toward it. Attention is where the deeper story begins. Imagine an early human finding a crystal among thousands of ordinary stones. First, the object must be noticed. Then it must be separated from everything around it. Then it must be picked up. Then carried away. Then kept long enough to enter the archaeological record somewhere it did not naturally belong. At every stage, the crystal survives another opportunity to be dropped. That sequence may sound simple, but it reveals a mind doing more than reacting to immediate need. The person is comparing, remembering, selecting, and assigning value. That value does not have to be symbolic. The crystal may not have represented a spirit, an ancestor, a place, or an idea. It may simply have been pleasurable to look at. It may have invited repeated investigation. It may have reminded someone of the location where it was found. It may have been shown to another person. It may have been given away. It may have been kept because no one in the group had seen anything like it before. Each explanation is possible. None is proven, but every one of them moves human behavior beyond immediate mechanical usefulness. This distinction matters because the archaeological record naturally favors things people made. A shaped hand axe announces itself. It has deliberate flakes and a cutting edge. A carved bone contains marks. A painted wall preserves pigment. But collecting can leave almost no mark at all. The human action is not visible on the object. It exists only in the distance between where the object formed and where someone left it. That means early collecting may be much older and more common than the evidence suggests. An excavator searching for tools can easily treat an unmodified crystal as part of the geology. A tiny prism may pass through a screen. A beautiful stone may be cataloged without anyone asking why it was inside the shelter. Objects that mattered precisely because they were left unchanged are some of the easiest objects for archaeology to miss. And that may change how we think about the beginning of human culture. Culture did not begin only when someone painted an animal. It did not begin only when someone carved a figure or drilled a shell. Before humans could create a beautiful object, they could recognize one. Before they could manufacture symmetry, they could notice it. Before they could explain why something mattered, they could decide that it did. You can still watch this behavior begin today. Give a child access to a beach. The child may ignore hundreds of nearly identical stones and return holding one. An adult asks what it is for. The child may not have an answer. It is smooth, it has a stripe, it catches the light, it looks like something, or it simply feels important. Adults do the same thing with more elaborate explanations. We carry shells home from vacations. We keep concert tickets after they can no longer admit us anywhere. We store photographs that provide no food and perform no physical work. We place polished stones on desks. We build museums to protect objects that would be mechanically useless in almost any emergency. The practical function is not inside the object. It exists inside the relationship between the object and a mind. A shell carries a memory. A ticket carries an experience. A crystal carries whatever attention, story, or feeling someone has attached to it. That does not mean an early quartz crystal held the same kind of memory. It means humans are capable of making an object valuable without changing its physical function. And the archaeological evidence suggests that ability is extremely old, possibly older than Homo sapiens. There is also a tempting mistake hiding here. It would be easy to call these crystals the first religion, or the first art, or proof that Homo erectus believed crystals possessed supernatural power. The evidence cannot support those claims. We do not know whether the crystals belonged to individuals or groups. We do not know whether they were displayed, hidden, exchanged, played with, or forgotten. We do not know whether every reported crystal was deliberately introduced by a human. And ancient deposits can be disturbed in ways that are difficult to reconstruct. The scientifically responsible conclusion is narrower. At several prehistoric sites, humans appear to have deliberately transported naturally distinctive crystals that show no clear practical use. A modern experiment suggests that some apes can also be strongly attracted to the transparency and geometry of crystals. Everything beyond that is a hypothesis, but uncertainty does not make the story weaker. It reveals exactly what is missing. Tools preserve the movement of ancient hands. Crystals may preserve the movement of ancient attention. The stone survives, the thought does not. But because someone moved the stone, the thought left a shadow. Human evolution is usually told through inventions. The first sharp edge, the first controlled fire, the first hunting weapon, the first boat. Every one of those technologies solved a problem. But a crystal with no clear use presents a different kind of milestone. It may represent the moment an object no longer needed to solve a problem in order to deserve a place in human life. That ability can lead in many directions: collecting, decoration, gifts, symbols, stories, art, and eventually science itself, because science often begins when someone pays attention to something that appears useless and asks why it behaves differently. We should not claim that a person carrying a quartz crystal was already an artist or a scientist. But the mental habit underneath those activities may have been present. Notice the unusual. Keep looking. Carry the question home. So return to that early human standing among ordinary stones. The group is moving. Food must be gathered. Tools must be protected. A child may need to be carried. And there, on the ground, is an object that contributes nothing obvious to survival. The person could leave it. Instead, they bend down, they pick it up, they turn it toward the light, and they carry it with them. The crystal still cannot hunt. It still cannot protect them. It still cannot feed a fire. But perhaps it was never carrying food, safety, or technology. Perhaps it was carrying attention, curiosity, memory, or the first quiet sense that some things are worth keeping simply because they make the mind stop and look again. So the real mystery is not why early humans collected something useless. The real mystery is when useless things stopped being useless. When did beauty earn its weight? When did curiosity become worth carrying? And when you keep a shell, a photograph, a ticket, or a small stone that serves no practical purpose, are you making a modern choice? Or are you repeating a decision that may be older than our own species?